Hey guys, here with another installment of our video series that we just started last week. I'm up here on Saturday because I was cheering on our football team who actually just finished a really awesome win, won 35-24, so congrats to all the guys on the football team. But anyway, today we're going to be studying the Trans-Saharan trade routes that developed. These routes have existed since ancient times, but really began to flourish along with the expansion of Islam in the 8th century CE. So in this session, you guys can find this on the top of your notes there. We're going to focus on these three questions. Why did these trading routes develop in the first place? How did the expansion of the Trans-Saharan routes impact the growth of Islam, and then vice versa? And then lastly, how did these trade networks connect West Africa over here to the rest of Eurasia through trade? So that's our focus for this. I'm going to get rid of myself here, and we're going to dive in. The beginnings of the Trans-Saharan trade routes all starts with the invention of the camel saddle. So the Saharan desert up here is one of the most formidable deserts in the world. It's the largest, it's pretty harsh, and it's next to impossible for most people to get across it on their own. So by inventing the camel saddle, people were able to attach supplies to their camels, like jugs of water, shelter, food, things like that, as well as to ride the camels across this vast desert and get down here to these areas that are less extreme. So that's really what starts this back in ancient times. But the trade network really starts to develop because of this gold salt trade that develops in West Africa. So as you guys can see on this map, all these little symbols here, these correspond to gold mines, because West Africa is really rich in gold. On the flip side, up here in North Africa, down in southern part of Morocco and so on, they have a lot of salt mines. So the trade that develops, I mean, gold for salt, in our day and age, this doesn't sound like a fair trade. You'd probably want gold more than salt. But salt is necessary to survive. And in ancient times, even by the time that the post-classical age develops, salt is not nearly as common as it is today, so it's an incredibly valuable resource. And basically, these societies down here in West Africa wouldn't have been able to survive without the salt that they were getting from up here in Northern Africa. And on the flip side, these people in Northern Africa, they don't have a lot of precious metals, things like gold, and so they're definitely willing to exchange the salt for gold. So this salt and gold trade is the driving force behind Trans-Saharan trade routes. It's really what's driving it forward. In addition to this, though, this trade network really begins to thrive around the same time that the Islamic Caliphate was expanding across North Africa and into Spain. So let me show you guys a map that'll make this more obvious. There we go. So what you guys are seeing on this map over here to the right, the stuff that's in this darker green color, this is basically what was being controlled by the Caliphate at the time. And so as the Caliphate expands, just like in the classical empires, when they're controlled by an empire, it makes the trading routes safer. And they're able to guard them, prevent thieves from having as big of an impact. So the expansion of the Caliphate makes trade safer. They're able to guard these trade routes and help this to develop. But even more so, when these goods, because as you guys can see over here, I mean, this is the Trans-Saharan trade network that was developing, but it basically links up here with the caliphate and the trade routes that existed at the time across North Africa. So because of this, you're able to get goods from up here all the way over into Cairo, and Cairo was a major stopping point on these trade routes. And from there, you know, these goods can make their way, I mean, up here to the Silk Roads, but even more so through the Red Sea, across Arabia into the Persian Gulf, but then out into the Indian Ocean, and basically to gain access to trade around this post-classical world. Lastly, one of the main driving forces behind the expansion of these trade routes was actually the Islamic religion. Because as Islam expanded, we see greater trade connections happening. And this is for a couple reasons. First of all, and that's what you're seeing, this map over here to the right, the lighter green stuff. These are the areas that are not being controlled by the caliphate. So this isn't part of the empire, but these are areas to which Islam has spread. Up here into, you know, Eastern Europe and Central Asia, India, but as you can see, a huge chunk of Africa that extends down the coast here. So as Islam expands, so too do these trade routes, and like I said, for a couple big reasons. Let's start this over here. Impact of Islam. You know, first, one of the big reasons that this helps trade expand is because of this concept of the Ummah. Think to yourself, pause the video if you need to, but think to yourself, what is the Ummah? We talked about this the other day. So the Ummah is this idea that all Muslims are part of this one broader Islamic community. It's like a brotherhood. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Even business people today, they tend to do business with people that they have shared interests with. So this idea of the Ummah starts breaking down barriers between people. I'm using my abbreviations. So it starts breaking down barriers between people. And if there are fewer barriers between us, trade is going to increase. Second, think about, in order to be a good Muslim, you're supposed to read the holy book, the Quran. The Quran was only written in which language? Arabic. So basically, as Islam expands, more people are speaking Arabic, which, if everyone's speaking the same language, it's easier to do trade. I mean, imagine trying to like meet someone and trade something, and you speak English, and this person walks up to you and is like, it's my made-up language. Obviously, you're going to have no idea what they're saying. It's going to be much harder to actually trade with that person, as opposed to someone walks up to you and is like, "Hi, I have some apples, you have pears, would you like to exchange those?" So this unified, let's switch back here. Whoop. This unified Arabic language makes trade easier. This is going to be really obvious, but makes trade easier because people speak the same language. But we don't always consider those kinds of connections, that they're not learning Arabic necessarily in order to help trade, but that does happen, but more so to be a better Muslim, and then the flip side, it helps to expand trade. Lastly, every single Muslim at one point in their life is supposed to do what? It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. Go on the Hajj. Oh, it would help if I could spell Hajj. Right? This pilgrimage to Mecca. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense that if someone is, from India, for example, and they're supposed to come over here to Mecca, I mean, they bring supplies with them. They bring their ideas with them. And as they meet people from other places, they're exchanging ideas. They're exchanging goods. And that's going to lead to an expansion of trade. Now, the expansion of the Trans-Saharan trade routes had important effects on the post-classical world. It's not just, trade is expanding and that's all we're paying attention to. This has important implications on the broader world itself. First, has to do with something we learned about in the last video, the Swahili city-states. Think to yourself, where are those? What are they? So the Swahili city-states are these trade cities that pop up down here on the east coast of Africa. So here's basically what happens. We referenced earlier that as these goods, gold, and other things are being brought up here into Africa, they're expanding across northern Africa to Cairo, making their way to the Indian Ocean. And then, they can go one of 2 directions. They can go out this direction, or they can come down here to these trade cities on the East Coast. And as you can see on this map at the bottom, which is basically the map that I'm showing you over here to the right, these Swahili city-states are basically a meeting point between the Trans-Saharan trade network and the, what is this one? Indian Ocean trade network. So if you were trying to get gold from Timbuktu down here to Mogadishu, well, actually not to Mogadishu. If you're trying to get gold from Timbuktu to Calicut in India, right? You would ship them up here to North Africa. They would make their way to Cairo, probably come down here through the Red Sea, and then end up here, because this is a major trading point where these merchants from all over the Indian Ocean region are stopping to exchange their goods. So basically these, and you can see this labeled on the map that you have right here, these Swahili city-states these guys expand because it's a meeting ground or a meeting point between the Trans-Saharan and the Indian Ocean routes. They expand and they pop up because it's this meeting point between these 2 vast trading networks that develop in this time. Lastly, as you guys can see on the map on the bottom of the page, oh, I'm sorry, before I get to that, another major effect. So, like I said, this map is showing, as well as the one on this on your page itself, this map is showing not only where